The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I doubled over in the emergency room waiting area, clutching my stomach. My sister Cassandra rolled her eyes and scrolled through her phone, muttering just loud enough for me to hear, "Here we go again. With the drama, Riley." I wanted to scream at her, to tell her this wasn't like the other times, that something was genuinely wrong. But the waves of pain stealing my breath made it impossible to form words. What I didn't know was that in 20 minutes, Dr. Harrison would walk into that examination room and change everything we thought we knew about my health and our family. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The pain had started 3 days earlier during my shift at the downtown Denver bookstore where I worked part-time while finishing my nursing degree. I was restocking the mystery section when it hit a sharp, a twisting sensation that felt like someone was wringing out my insides like a wet towel. I'd experienced stomach issues before, usually during stressful periods like finals week or family gatherings. So I brushed it off and popped some antacids, but this was different. The pain didn't fade after a few hours like it normally did.
Instead.
It seemed to migrate, spreading from my abdomen up toward my chest and down into my legs. By the second day, I could barely keep food down, and simple tasks like climbing. The stairs to my apartment left me dizzy and nauseous. Cassandra had been staying with me that week while her own apartment was being fumigated. At 26, was 2 years older than me and worked as a marketing executive for a tech startup. She'd always been the successful one, the one who never got sick, never missed work, never had what our mother diplomatically called episodes. "You need to eat something," she said Thursday morning, finding me curled up on the couch in my pajamas. "You're probably just dehydrated. You do this every time you get stressed about school." Try to explain that this felt completely different from my usual anxiety-related stomach problems. But she was already in full big sister mode, bringing me crackers and ginger ale while lecturing me about proper nutrition and stress management. "Remember when you convinced yourself you had appendicitis? During sophomore year," she said, settling into the armchair across from me. "You made Dad drive you to 3 different urgent care centers before they finally told you it was just stress." The memory stung because it was true. I had a history of health anxiety that had led to numerous medical visits over the years. Food poisoning made me convinced I had stomach cancer. A headache turned into certainty that I had a brain tumor. Each time the tests came back normal, and each time my family became a little more skeptical of my concerns. But this time felt fundamentally different. The pain wasn't the vague, shifting discomfort I'd experienced before. It was specific, intense, and getting worse by the hour. When I tried to shower Thursday evening, I collapsed against the bathroom wall, gasping as another wave of agony rolled through me. "Cassie," I called out, my voice echoing off the tile walls. She appeared in the doorway, took one look at me sitting on the shower floor with the water still running, and sighed. "Riley, you're being dramatic. Turn off the water and come eat the soup." I made that night, I barely slept. The pain seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat, and every position I tried only made it worse. By Friday morning, I knew I needed medical attention, regardless of what my sister thought. "I'm going to the emergency room," I announced. Finding Cassandra in the kitchen making coffee before work, she turned around. Already dressed in her sharp blazer and heels, her expression a mixture of frustration and concern. "Riley, you can't keep doing this. You have that pharmacology exam next week, and you're going to fail if you don't study instead of running to the hospital every time you feel anxious." "This isn't anxiety," I said, gripping the counter as another wave hit. "Something is really wrong. You said that about the chest pains last year, the time you thought you were having a stroke because your vision was blurry, and when you were convinced that mole was melanoma." She grabbed her purse and headed toward the door. "I have a presentation at 9. If you're determined to go to the ER, at least wait until I can drive you this afternoon." But I couldn't wait. The rational part of my brain knew she might be right. Did have a track record of medical false alarms. But the part of me writhing in pain knew this was different. I called an Uber and made my way to Denver General Hospital, the triage nurse. A kind woman named Patricia with gray-streaked hair took my vitals and asked about my symptoms. When I described the pain, and mentioned my history of anxiety-related medical visits, I saw something shift in her expression, a subtle change that I'd learned to recognize over the years. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your pain? She asked, her voice professional, but slightly detached. 8, I said honestly. Maybe 9. She made a note on her chart. Any recent stressors? Changes in your routine? School pressures? I found myself explaining about my upcoming exams, my part-time job, and the general stress of nursing school. With each detail I shared, I could see her mentally categorizing me into a familiar box. Young adult, history of anxiety, probably psychosomatic. The waiting room was crowded with people who looked genuinely ill, a man with a clearly broken arm, an elderly woman struggling to breathe, a child with a high fever. I began to doubt myself. Maybe Cassandra was right. Maybe I was just stressed about school, and my body was reacting the way it always did. When Cassandra arrived 2 hours later, finding me still in the waiting area, her "I told you so" expression was unmistakable. "How long have you been here?" she asked, settling into the uncomfortable plastic chair beside me. "Since 10:30, I said. "They said it might be a while since I'm not presenting as an emergency." She pulled out her phone and started responding. "To work emails. Maybe we should just go home. You could make an appointment with your regular doctor next week if you're still feeling off." But before I could respond, a nurse called my name. We were led to a small examination room where I changed into a hospital gown and waited on the narrow bed. Cassandra sat in the visitor chair, occasionally glancing up from her phone to give me encouraging but skeptical smiles. The pain was getting worse. What had started as a deep ache had evolved into sharp stabbing sensations that made me gasp, involuntarily. Each time I winced or groaned, I caught Cassandra's eye roll in my peripheral vision. "Try to relax," she said, when I shifted positions for the dozenth time. "You're tensing up, which is probably making everything worse." When Dr. Harrison finally entered, a tall, serious-looking man in his 50s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, I was barely holding it together. The pain had reached a level that made it difficult to think clearly. I found myself gripping the edges of the examination table just to stay upright. "I'm Dr. Harrison," he said, washing his hands. "At the small sink? I understand you're experiencing abdominal pain. Can you tell me when this started and how it's progressed?" I began to explain, but Cassandra interrupted. "She has a history of anxiety-related stomach issues," she said, her voice carrying a weary tone of someone who'd been through this many times before. "She tends to catastrophize when she's stressed about school." Dr. Harrison nodded politely, but turned his attention back to me. "In your own words, Riley, can you describe what you're feeling?" As I tried to articulate the specific nature of the pain, its location, and how it had changed over the past 3 days, I could see him listening intently. Unlike the triage nurse, his expression remained neutral, professional. He asked detailed questions about the progression of symptoms, my family medical history, and whether I'd taken any medications. "I'd like to run some tests," he said finally. "Blood work, urinalysis, and possibly some imaging, depending on what we find." Cassandra shifted in her chair. "Is all that really necessary? I mean, she's done this before, and it always turns out to be stress-related." Dr. Harrison's response was measured but firm. "It's always better to be thorough, especially when someone is experiencing significant pain. We'll start with the basics and see what the labs tell us." What happened next would prove that sometimes the people who know us best can be the most wrong about what we're experiencing. The blood draw was routine, but the technician, a young guy named Marcus, had to stick me twice because my veins keep collapsing. "Dehydrated," he muttered, finally getting a good sample from my left arm. "When's the last time you had a full meal?" Couldn't remember. Food had become repulsive over the past 48 hours, and even water sometimes triggered violent nausea. Cassandra watched the whole process with her arms crossed, checking her watch periodically. Her presentation had been rescheduled to Monday. But I could tell she was mentally calculating how much work time this hospital visit was costing her. "The doctor wants a urine sample too," Marcus said, handing me a sterile cup. "Bathroom's down the hall to the right." Standing up from the examination table sent a lightning bolt of pain through my entire torso. I doubled over, gasping, and had to grip the bed rail to keep from falling. For a moment, black spots danced across my vision. "Oh, whoa. Easy, Marcus," said, reaching out to steady me. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I managed, though my voice came out as barely a whisper. "Just got up too fast." Cassandra helped me to the bathroom. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I saw genuine worry flicker across her face. "Riley, maybe you should lie back down." "I can ask them to bring a bedpan or no," I said firmly. "I can do this." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The walk to the bathroom felt like a marathon. Each step sent shockwaves of agony radiating from my abdomen outward, and by the time I reached the door, I was drenched in cold sweat. The fluorescent lighting in the small restroom was harsh and unforgiving, making my reflection in the mirror look almost ghostly: pale skin, dark circles under my eyes, lips that had lost most of their color. When I saw my urine sample, my heart skipped. Instead of the normal pale yellow I expected, the liquid in the cup was distinctly cloudy with a reddish tinge. Blood. There was definitely blood. "Cassie?" I called out, my voice shaking. "Something's wrong." She was waiting right outside the door and followed me back to the examination room, where I handed the sample to Marcus. His casual expression changed immediately when he looked at the cup. "I'll get this to the lab right away," he said, his tone now urgent. "Dr. Harrison will want to see these results as soon as possible." The next 2 hours crawled by in a haze of escalating pain and mounting anxiety. Cassandra tried to distract me with stories from her work, but I could barely focus on her words. The examination room felt like it was shrinking, the walls pressing in as wave after wave of agony crashed over me. "Your color's really off," Cassandra said at one point, studying my face with growing concern. "You look gray-eyed." A different nurse came in, older, more experienced looking, and took my vitals again. Her frown as she read the blood pressure cuff made my stomach clench with fear. "Has anyone given you anything for pain?" she asked. "No," I said. "They said they wanted to see the test results first." She made a note on her tablet. "I'm going to speak with Dr. Harrison about that. Your blood pressure is quite low and your heart rate is elevated." After she left, Cassandra finally put away her phone completely. "Riley, I'm starting to think maybe I was wrong earlier. You really don't look good." Before I could respond, Dr. Harrison returned with a tablet in his hands, and an expression I couldn't read. Behind him walked another woman in a white coat, Dr. Sarah Chen, according to her badge, who looked to be about Dr. Harrison's age, with short black hair and serious brown eyes. "Riley, this is Dr. Chen from our internal medicine department," Dr. Harrison said. "I've asked her to consult on your case because your test results are ... concerning." The word concerning hit me like a physical blow. Cassandra straightened in her chair, suddenly completely alert. "Your blood work shows several significant abnormalities," Dr. Chen said, pulling up a chair beside my bed. "Your white blood cell count is extremely elevated, which indicates your body is fighting some kind of infection or inflammation. More troubling, your kidney function markers are well outside normal ranges." "Kidney function?" I repeated, my voice coming out as a croak. "Your creatinine and BUN levels suggest your kidneys aren't filtering waste products effectively," Dr. Harrison explained. "Combined with the blood and protein in your urine sample, we're looking at what appears to be acute kidney injury. Rooms seem to tilt sideways. But ... kidney problems? I'm 24 years old. I exercise regularly. I don't drink that much. Age doesn't protect you from certain conditions," Dr. Chen said gently. "We need to run more specific tests to determine what's causing this. But based on your symptoms and these initial results, we're admitting you to the hospital for further evaluation and treatment." Cassandra's face had gone completely white. "Wait, admitting her? Like overnight?" "Likely several days," Dr. Harrison said. "We need to start for fluids immediately to support her kidney function, and we'll be running additional blood work every 6 hours to monitor how she responds to treatment." "But it could still be stress-related, right?" Cassandra asked, though her voice lacked its earlier confidence. "I mean, Anxiety can cause all sorts of physical symptoms. Dr. Chen shook her head. Anxiety doesn't cause kidney injury or the level of inflammatory markers we're seeing in Riley's blood. This is a genuine medical emergency that requires immediate intervention. The word emergency echoed in my head as nurses suddenly appeared with 4 equipment and began preparing to move me to a regular hospital room. Everything happened quickly. Blood pressure cuffs, oxygen monitors, multiple 4 lines being started in both arms. "We're going to give you something for the pain now," one of the nurses said as she injected something into my 4 line. "This should help you feel more comfortable while we figure out exactly what's going on." The relief was almost instantaneous. The crushing, twisting agony that had dominated my existence for the past 3 days faded to a manageable ache. The first time since this ordeal began, I could think clearly. "I'm sorry," Cassandra whispered, gripping my hand as they wheeled my bed through the hospital corridors. "I should have listened to you, should have taken this seriously from the beginning." "You couldn't have known," I said, though part of me was still hurt by how quickly she'd dismissed my concerns. Even I thought maybe I was overreacting. As we reached my new room, a semi-private space with monitors and equipment that looked far more serious than the emergency department, Dr. Chen appeared again with a clipboard. "Riley, I need to ask you some additional questions about your medical history," she said. "Have you ever been diagnosed with any autoimmune conditions? Lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease?" "No, nothing like that," I said. "I mean, I've always been pretty healthy except for the anxiety stuff." "Any family history of kidney disease, diabetes, or autoimmune disorders?" I thought about my parents, both of whom were generally healthy, and my maternal grandmother who died when I was young. My grandmother had diabetes, but that's about all I know. Dr. Chen made notes. "We're going to run a more comprehensive panel tomorrow morning, including tests for several autoimmune markers. Based on the pattern of your symptoms and the rapid onset, we're particularly interested in ruling out something called lupus nephritis." "Lupus," Cassandra repeated, "but that's a serious disease, isn't it?" "If that's what this turns out to be, yes. It's a chronic condition that requires ongoing management," Dr. Chen said. "But it's also very treatable when caught early. The key is getting an accurate diagnosis so we can start appropriate treatment." As the evening shift nurses came in to check my vitals and draw more blood, I found myself staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything that had happened. Less than 12 hours ago, my biggest worry had been studying for a pharmacology exam. Now I was facing the possibility of a chronic autoimmune disease that could affect multiple organ systems. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was studying to become a nurse, learning about various diseases and conditions in textbooks, while potentially developing one of those very conditions myself. All those times Cassandra and my family had dismissed my health concerns as anxiety-driven, attention-seeking, suddenly felt different in this new context. What if my body had been trying to tell me something important all along? The next morning brought a parade of specialists I'd never heard of before. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez from rheumatology arrived first. A woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and an incredibly thorough approach to questioning. She spent nearly an hour going through my entire medical history, asking about symptoms I'd dismissed or forgotten, the occasional joint stiffness after long study sessions, the butterfly-shaped rash that appeared on my cheeks last summer that I'd attributed to too much sun, the fatigue that seemed disproportionate to my actual activity level. "Have you noticed any hair loss recently?" she asked, examining my scalp with a small flashlight. "Actually, yes," I admitted. My roommate mentioned that my shower drain had been clogging more than usual, but I thought it was just stress from finals. Cassandra, who had spent the night in the uncomfortable reclining chair beside my bed, looked up from her coffee. "You never mentioned hair loss, 'cause you would have told me it was anxiety," I said, then immediately felt bad for the sharp tone. "Sorry, I just learned to keep things to myself." Dr. Rodriguez continued her examination, checking my lymph nodes, looking at my nail beds, and documenting a dozen small signs that individually meant nothing, but together painted a clear picture. When she was finished, she sat down with a serious expression. "Riley, based on your symptoms, lab results, and physical examination, I'm confident you have systemic lupus erythematosus, with kidney involvement, what we call lupus nephritis. Blood work we ran overnight confirms this diagnosis. The words hung in the air like a judgment. Lupus. A chronic autoimmune disease that I'd studied in my pathophysiology class just 2 months earlier. I remembered writing notes about how the immune system attacks healthy tissue, how it could affect virtually any organ system, how it predominantly affected young women. But I'm healthy, I said weakly. I exercise, I eat well most of the time, I don't smoke. Lupus isn't caused by lifestyle choices, Dr. Rodriguez explained patiently. It's an autoimmune condition with genetic and environmental triggers that we don't fully understand. What's important now is that we caught it relatively early, especially the kidney involvement. Dr. Chen appeared with another tablet full of test results. The good news is that your kidney function has already started improving with the 4 fluids and supportive care. The protein levels in your urine have decreased significantly overnight. Does this mean for her long term? Cassandra asked, and I could hear the guilt in her voice. What kind of treatment are we looking at? Lupus is a manageable condition, Dr. Rodriguez said. We'll start you on immunosuppressive medications to calm down the autoimmune response and protect your kidneys. Most people with lupus live completely normal lives with proper treatment and monitoring. The next few hours were a crash course in becoming a patient with a chronic illness. Pharmacists explained medications with names I couldn't pronounce. Social workers discussed insurance coverage and disability accommodations. Nutritionists talked about dietary modifications to support kidney health. My parents arrived that afternoon, driving up from Colorado Springs in a panic after Cassandra finally called them. My mother, a high school teacher named Linda, immediately went into protective mode, asking detailed questions about every medication and treatment plan. My father, David, who worked in construction, looked overwhelmed by all the medical terminology, but held my hand throughout every conversation. I should have listened to you, my mother said during a quiet moment when it was just the 3 of us. All those times you said something felt wrong, and we kept telling you it was just anxiety. We didn't know, I said, though I was still processing my own feelings about years of dismissed concerns. Even the doctors didn't know at first. But we're supposed to advocate for you, my father said. We're supposed to believe you when you say something's wrong. Dr. Rodriguez returned. That evening, with my discharge paperwork and a comprehensive treatment plan, you'll need to see me every 2 weeks initially, and we'll be monitoring your kidney function closely. The medications we're starting you on should help prevent flare-ups and protect your organs from further damage. Can she still finish nursing? School? Cassandra asked. It was a question I'd been afraid to voice myself. Absolutely, Dr. Rodriguez said. You might need some accommodations during flare-ups. And you'll need to be careful about exposure to infections, since the medications suppress your immune system. But there's no reason you can't continue your education and career. The relief I felt was overwhelming. For a brief, terrifying period, I'd imagined my entire future crumbling, my career plans derailed, my independence compromised, my identity as a capable, healthy young adult shattered, as we gather my belongings to leave. The hospital, Cassandra pulled me aside. Riley, I owe you a huge apology. It's not just for this week, but for years of not taking your concerns seriously. You weren't the only one, I said. I think I even started doubting myself. It's exactly the problem, she said. You know your body better than anyone else. You knew something was different this time, and I should have supported you instead of dismissing you. The drive home was quiet, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I stared out the window at the familiar Denver streets, struck by how normal everything looked when my entire world had shifted fundamentally. 3 days ago, I was a healthy nursing student with occasional anxiety. Now, I was someone with a chronic autoimmune disease who would need regular medical monitoring for the rest of my life. But as we pulled into my apartment complex, I realized something important had changed beyond just my diagnosis. For the first time in years, my family had witnessed firsthand that my health concerns were valid, that my instincts about my body were trustworthy, that I wasn't an anxious hypochondriac seeking attention. You know what's crazy? I said as Cassandra helped me up the stairs to my apartment. Part of me is almost relieved to have a real diagnosis. To know that all those times I felt like something was wrong, I wasn't imagining it. Your body was. Trying to tell you something? She agreed. And now we know how to listen. 6 months later, my lupus was well controlled with medication. And I was back in nursing school with accommodations that allowed me to manage my condition while pursuing my degree. The experience has taught me invaluable lessons about patient advocacy and the importance of believing people when they describe their symptoms. More importantly, has transformed my relationship with my family. Cassandra became my fiercest advocate, accompanying me to medical appointments and helping me navigate the complexities of chronic illness management. My parents learned to ask different questions, not whether my symptoms were real, but how they could best support me during my medical surgical nursing rotation. I encountered patients whose stories echoed my own people whose pain had been dismissed, whose symptoms had been attributed to anxiety or attention-seeking behavior, who had learned to doubt their own experiences. I made it my mission to truly listen, to validate their concerns, and to advocate for thorough evaluations. The irony wasn't lost on me that being accused of attention-seeking had nearly prevented me from getting the medical attention I desperately needed, but in the end, trusting my instincts and refusing to accept dismissive explanations had quite literally saved my kidneys and possibly my life. Sometimes the people who know us best are the least equipped to recognize when something genuinely changes. And sometimes, what looks like dramatic attention-seeking is actually a desperate attempt to communicate that something is seriously wrong. The key is learning to distinguish between the two and, when in doubt, always are on the side of taking health concerns seriously. After all, the cost of unnecessary medical tests is nothing compared to the cost of missing a diagnosis that could change everything. The first year with lupus brought unexpected challenges that no one had prepared me for. Beyond the medical management, there were social complexities I hadn't anticipated. Some friends disappeared when they learned about my diagnosis, either from fear of contagion, despite my repeated explanations that autoimmune diseases aren't infectious, or from discomfort with the reality that young, seemingly healthy people could develop serious chronic conditions. Other relationships deepened in ways I never expected. My study group partner, Marcus, whose father had rheumatoid arthritis, became an invaluable source of practical advice about managing fatigue during flare-ups. He taught me about pacing techniques and energy conservation strategies that weren't covered in any medical pamphlet. The hardest part wasn't the medications or the regular blood draws. It was learning to navigate the invisible nature of my illness. On good days, when my symptoms were well controlled, people would comment on how normal I looked, sometimes adding thoughtless remarks like "you don't look sick" or "you seem fine now." These well-meaning observations carried an unspoken implication that perhaps my previous complaints had been exaggerated. During my psychiatric nursing rotation, I met patients whose mental health conditions had been dismissed in similar ways, told their depression was just sadness, their anxiety merely nervousness, their bipolar disorder simply mood swings. The parallels were striking and reinforced my commitment to believing patients regardless of whether their conditions were visible or measurable through traditional means. Dr. Rodriguez became more than just my rheumatologist. She became a mentor who taught me about the intersection of medicine and advocacy. During one appointment, she shared her own experience as a young resident when her endometriosis symptoms were repeatedly dismissed by senior physicians who suggested her pain was psychological. Medicine has a long history of not believing women, especially young women, she told me. Your experience isn't unique, unfortunately, but it's part of why we need more healthcare providers who understand what it feels like to have their concerns minimized. This conversation sparked my interest in pursuing a specialization in rheumatology nursing after graduation. I began attending local lupus support groups, not just for my own benefit, but to better understand the patient experience from multiple perspectives. The stories I heard thereof, delayed diagnoses, dismissive healthcare encounters, and family relationships strained by invisible illness, reinforced the importance of advocacy and active listening in healthcare. Cassandra, meanwhile, had undergone her own transformation. She enrolled in a medical advocacy course and began accompanying other family members to medical appointments. When our cousin Jessica complained of persistent headaches that their doctor attributed to stress, Cassandra insisted on a second opinion. The MRI revealed a benign but significant brain tumor that required surgical intervention. "I learned from my mistake with you," Cassandra told Jessica after the successful surgery. "When someone says something feels wrong, we listen and we advocate until we get answers." My graduation from nursing school felt like a victory not just for me, but for everyone who had supported my journey through diagnosis and treatment. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I thought about all the patients I hoped to serve with the empathy and understanding that my own experience had given me. The keynote speaker at graduation talked about the privilege and responsibility of being entrusted with other people's health and well-being. Her words resonated deeply as I reflected on how different my own healthcare experience might have been if more providers had approached my concerns with curiosity rather than skepticism. Today, working as a nurse in the rheumatology department at Denver General, the same hospital where I received my diagnosis, I encounter patients daily who are experiencing what I went through. Last week, I cared for a teenager whose joint pain had been attributed to growing pains for 2 years. Before blood tests revealed juvenile arthritis, her mother's relief at finally having answers was palpable, and I shared my own story to help them understand that they weren't alone in having their concerns initially dismissed. The teenager's father asked me a question that patients' families often pose: how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? How do we know when to push for more tests versus when to accept reassurance that everything is normal? It's a complex question without simple answers, but my response always centers on trusting instincts while maintaining open communication with healthcare providers. I encourage patients to document their symptoms, to bring trusted advocates to appointments, and to seek second opinions when their concerns aren't being adequately addressed. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I had listened to Cassandra and stayed home that Friday morning instead of going to the emergency room. Would my kidney function have deteriorated further? Would the delay in diagnosis have led to permanent organ damage? These hypothetical scenarios remind me daily of the stakes involved when medical concerns are dismissed or delayed. The relationship between patients and healthcare providers is built on trust. But that trust must flow in both directions. Patients need to trust that their providers have the knowledge and skills to help them. But providers must also trust that patients are the experts on their own bodies and experiences. When that mutual trust exists, even complex diagnoses can be reached efficiently and compassionately. My lupus remains well controlled, requiring ongoing vigilance, but no longer dominating my daily life. The experience taught me that chronic illness doesn't have to define you, but it can certainly shape you in meaningful ways. For me, it created a deeper appreciation for health, stronger family relationships, and a career path that feels truly purposeful. Most importantly, it taught me to never again apologize for advocating for my own health or for taking my symptoms seriously, regardless of how others might perceive them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.